Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Dunesteef Audio Fiction Magazine. And now here's your host, Rish Outfield.
Okay, testing.
And Big Anklevich.
Okay, rolling. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Dunesteef Audio Fiction Magazine. I am Big Anklevich.
And I'm Rish Outfield, your co-host in this bizarre journey into 2 episodes in a month.
It's very bizarre. It's like we've gotten into a DeLorean and gone back in time many, many years. Not quite 30, though, at least.
Yeah, do you want to explain to the listener how we got here?
Sure. So we're doing a Christmas extravaganza this year because last year we opened our usual Christmas story writing thing that we do. Rish and I tend to, every December, write a Christmas story. It doesn't have to be anything particular. It doesn't have to be based on any, certain premise. We just write a Christmas story. But this past year, we decided to make it necessarily and definitely based on a particular premise. But we didn't really have one. And so we asked our listeners to provide us one. And we got a bunch of different suggestions. Rish and I tossed them around to each other, and we decided on...
A child is proclaimed king.
Our queen! You sexist pig!
And discovers that everyone in town is exactly the same. But it is enough.
You're invited to your girlfriend's...
or boyfriend's...
family Christmas dinner for the first time. But the meal isn't what you were expecting. So, the interesting thing about that premise is that today's author, Nathan Ahlgrim, is the listener who suggested the premise. So, that's cool. I think he felt obligated once we used his premise. He's like, oh crap, now I have to do the contest. Waste time getting something on the worthless Dunesteef show.
Oh, he hadn't had an idea in mind for a story.
I don't know. He may have.
And was just using it as an excuse. Because, that would be very clever if you had had like a story you'd been kicking around for a long time, but you'd never had the motivation to sit down and write it. So you write a similar premise for a broken mirror prompt, hoping that if it gets picked, you'll take that as a sign that you have to write it.
I don't know. Maybe that was what happened. If so, I don't think that he has informed us about that. If we find out later, like in his author's note, that is what happened, then just edit this part out.
Okay.
So the story is called He Went to the Farm. And it's by Nathan Ahlgrim, as we just said. Nathan Ahlgrim teaches psychology at a community college in North Carolina. He got his PhD in neuroscience. But ever since running away from that life, all his degree means is that he has an obsession for learning how brains work and how to mess with them. His stories often include the kind of brain stuff that is too fun and not real enough for actual scientists. When not writing, he can be found hiking through the mountains, ballroom dancing, or Googling the latest trends so his students don't think he's too old. And that's how he discovered Siren Head. How about that?
Siren Head.
A creepypasta.
The creepiest. More creepy than ragu. No, ragu is spaghetti sauce. What is Barilla a pasta brand?
Barilla is a pasta brand, yeah.
Okay, well, darn it.
You blew it.
That's right. I had the chance to make a not funny joke, and I blew it.
I guess we'll go ahead and hit the story, and we'll see you guys on the other side. I hope you enjoy it.
Good luck.
He Went to the Farm by Nathan Ahlgrim. Beth's house looked exactly like all the pictures she had showed me over the past 4 months. That is to say, once I hopped out of the car, unlocked the unreasonably heavy metal gate with the passcode she gave me, swung it aside, and we continued along the half-mile dirt driveway, the Rappeau family farm finally revealed itself as a postcard for wholesome American life. At least, it did if you ignored the industrial warehouse behind it humming with a row of hulking freezers popping out at regular intervals along the walls. The 2-story emblem of the American farmer shone in the winter sun, the wraparound porch looking deceptively inviting in the bright but bitterly cold Minnesota snow. An impressive wrought iron sign stood in front of the yard to greet us as Beth pulled our dusty red Subaru up alongside 2 black pickup trucks. The farm. Why the sign here instead of over your gate like all the other properties around here? I asked as we walked back to the trunk. Why would we want to do that? Beth said, swinging her duffel out of the trunk. The farm doesn't need that sort of publicity. We like our privacy here. She still called it the farm here, which I never knew was its actual name. It had made sense when we swapped life stories in scattered Minneapolis bars, where all farms were foreign enough to belong to the same category. But we had passed no fewer than 15 distinct farms, ranches, and other sprawling acreages in the last half hour. Signs for Madison Ranch, Rambling Creek Farms, and heck, even Moo Cow Sanctuary greeted us from the main road. The Rappeau family, by contrast, posted up behind an anonymous gate, stubbornly refusing a family name. Just the farm. I would have to bring that up later, because Beth scrambled up the white wooden stairs before I could close the trunk, giggling as if returning to her childhood home instantly transformed her into that child. Her exploding waterfall of brown hair sent waves down her shoulders as she bounced towards the door. I sighed. I wished she would have stayed by my side to help me break the ice in what I thought was an important meeting, but that wouldn't be like Beth. These spurts of childishness were part of what made me love her, even if they left me alone and awkward at times. The heavy door swung wide before she got to the landing to reveal what I could only assume to be her parents. Squeals and shouts burst forth from all 3 Rappeaus as Beth jumped into the arms of a strong, gray-haired woman standing a few inches shorter than Beth's 5'9". I couldn't help but smile at the family resemblance. Both women sported the same slightly too large nose and slightly too small mouth. Those features that Beth rocked with what was, to me at least, inexplicable confidence. I would have placed money that her mother sported the same honey-brown eyes. Her father stayed in the doorway, his slumping shoulders making him look paradoxically small, even as he towered over them by no less than 6 inches. I hesitated by the car, unsure of when or if I should join the family reunion. I didn't expect them to walk into the house without me, but I was soon left alone on the driveway without so much as a backwards glance. Taking the initiative was never something I was known for. Beth made all the first moves, which I'm sure would be the topic of many a story over dinner. I swayed back and forth, putting my hand on the Subaru, then removing it, then putting it back on. This was exactly when boots would have saved me. With that furball on my shoulder, I never had to worry about an awkward entrance. I could count on all eyes being glued to the improbably trained cat perched on my shoulder, not me. I'd been freezing like this more and more often ever since I lost him 3 months ago. Yo, Sam, you coming in or what? Dad already thinks you're imaginary. Please don't prove him right. The silhouette of Beth's poofy locks popped out of the door to beckon me in. I smiled nervously as I re-shouldered my duffel and headed up the stairs. I knew what I signed up for. Christmas dinner with the Rappeaus, with or without boots. If Beth's parents were as gregarious as her, I'd be lucky to stumble through with my pride and relationship intact. Beth had promised me a Norman Rockwell Christmas. There isn't anything my parents don't do for Christmas dinner, she had said 2 weeks earlier. Yule log, eggnog, Christmas crackers, fruitcake, you name it. I'm sure they'd dress up as elves if I even hinted that you'd enjoy it. She had been hyping it up all week, certain that an all-out holiday celebration would be just the thing to bring me out of my post-boots funk. Of course, she glossed over the fact that with the festivities would come the pressure of meeting the parents for the first time. I'd never gotten to that stage with ex Rebecca. Granted, I hadn't had enough relationships to build a pattern, but my lack of experience made the prospect all the more daunting. Beth didn't think anything of it. I made a point of not asking her how many other boyfriends had made the pilgrimage to the farm. The house had looked suspiciously unfestive from the outside, but I was greeted with a jolly slap of Christmas spirit as soon as I walked through the threshold. Cinnamon and nutmeg laced the air, and I automatically scanned the entryway for a source. I couldn't locate it, but I did find the holidays making their mark on every conceivable surface. The Repos had decked their halls with half a forest's worth of pine cones, holly, wreaths, and garlands. Doorways were framed, doors were decorated, and banisters were lined with greenery. Norman Rockwell, indeed. Apparently, I wouldn't even get formally introduced until my butt landed in my chair for the big dinner. No sooner had I entered the house than I saw Mom and Dad. Beth warned me they'd insist on me addressing them as if I was part of the family. Disappear through the swinging door leading to the kitchen. "They just want to make sure everything's perfect for your first time here," Beth said as we walked up the wide wooden staircase to the second floor. "I don't know about you, but I sure hope you turn into a repeat customer." She winked at me and shoved me into the guest room at the top of the landing. I didn't realize Norman Rockwell was an interior designer. A sturdy wooden bed stood against the far wall draped with a traditional quilt. The two side walls offered stately portraits, or at least that's what I was expecting when I first noticed the elaborately engraved picture frames. They were portraits, but not of notable family members or classic American landscapes. On the left wall, a guinea pig, cradled in a felt nest. On the right wall, rabbit, mid-hop in a field of clover. Both were spitting images of my childhood pets, Nibbles and Boing Boing. A wave of nostalgia washed over me. Did Beth set her parents up to this to make me feel more at home? Doubtful they'd commissioned 2 pet portraits for a boyfriend who had barely made it to 4 months with their daughter. Lucky break for me, I guess. A single nail protruded from the wall above the bed as if waiting for a third portrait to adorn the room. Given the meticulousness with which the rest of the house had been prepared, I was surprised at this oversight. Nevertheless, I felt an instant connection with the missing portrait. Boots would fit in perfectly with the 2 other animals who had come in and out of my life. And with that, I can finally welcome you officially to the farm. And Merry Christmas! Mrs. Repos, or Mom as she insisted, beamed as she settled a steaming ceramic baking dish onto the center of the elaborate oak dining table. She stepped back to take in her success with the meal, and I couldn't hold that against her. Granted, I didn't have much to compare it against following my Scrooge-like upbringing, but the spread was a dazzling mix of comfort food and holiday extravagance. The bubbling casserole took center stage, but it was surrounded by a glittering crystal bowl of chunky cranberry sauce, thick slabs of ham, and a platter piled high with pillowy dinner rolls. Everything gleamed from the holly-adorned china to the silverware that, for the first time in my life, I was reasonably certain was actual silver. Mom, Dad, this is absolutely incredible, I stammered. I put everything I had into those words, trying to make them sound as genuinely grateful as I felt. To welcome me into your home like this and into one of your traditions, I just... Like so many times before, words failed me. Actually, I should take more responsibility. I failed words. Now I see where Beth gets it from, I ended lamely. It may have been out of sheer politeness, but Mrs. Repos took it graciously, never having to hesitate as she took her seat across from me at the table. Well, Sam, you are part of the family now. Anyone important to Beth deserves a seat at our table. And I hope you have an appetite to match your manners. The first meal at the farm is always a memorable one. The entire Repos family apparently had a thing for winking. It seemed as though I had done okay so far. Beth leaned over to me, planting a kiss on my left cheek. Like I told you, this one's special.
Well, it's a good thing we prepared then.
Mr. Rappeau said with a chuckle.
You know, Sam, we haven't seen such a light in Beth's eyes since she was a kid. You must be doing something right.
Beth seemed eager to change the subject, blushing enough to accent the holiday decor. Right, well, remember, Sam, eating with my family is just like eating with me. Don't be shy, let's get those plates passing. We spent the next 5 minutes in contented silence, fully appreciating the meal. No one even tried to quip anything like that tired "and a hush fell over the crowd" line. I knew I liked them for a reason. Not wanting to play the part of an interrupting waiter, I waited until all mouths were empty before reinserting myself into the conversation. I can honestly say I've never had anything like this casserole before. I don't know what it is or how I've been ignorant of whatever Christmas tradition this is for my 26 years, but I love it. My compliments to you both. I'm so glad you're enjoying it, Mrs. Rappeau said. Honestly, I was just a touch concerned with the menu. You didn't give us much to work with, you know. She said it with a smile, but her comment made the casserole drop a foot deeper in my stomach. Was I that impossible a dinner guest? Usurping the menu with an unruly list of dietary restrictions? Sure, I was lactose intolerant, avoided fish, was allergic to tree nuts, and disliked onions, but that wouldn't throw off any dinner plans, would it? Beth jumped in, sensing my discomfort. Oh, don't pretend like you don't love the challenge. I seem to remember you screaming in excitement when I told you he was coming.
Oh, we were excited, all right,
Mr. Rappeau said, from across Beth.
But don't get too comfortable.
He let the silence stretch out just long enough for me to start sweating again. Just as my mouth flopped open, he cut in with what, to him, must have been a friendly chuckle.
You need to earn your meal, son. We want the stories. We want the history. Beth only tells us so much, you know.
Oh, that would still be awkward, but that's an awkwardness I could handle. Well, you've probably heard our meet cute before. I glanced at Beth, who nodded encouragingly. But I guess you're wanting to hear it from me, too. Is that it? Bingo. Okay, then. Well, this was back in August. I was just walking around Lake Harriet with Boots. I did that a lot back then. He helped me get out of the house, no matter how I was feeling. It was still hard for me to talk about Boots without getting a little choked up. I looked over to Beth for help. She jumped in. You know, a cute guy with a cat on his shoulder. Boots was looking a little ragged even then, but he was such a darn proud cat. Both he and Sam were getting a good number of gawkers, but I couldn't help myself. I had to get closer. And it was a good thing, too, because I immediately knew I'd be seeing him again soon. The Rappeaus had started eating again, so at least a part of their attention would be diverted away from me. That was exactly what she told me, I said. It was easier to relive that night if I focused on Beth. She asked me how I went about training a cat, and if I fed him a kibble diet or let him hunt for himself. You know, I'd gotten so used to people just asking me, why on earth would you bring a cat with you? That Beth won me over in just a couple of sentences for not being so judgy. Well, and I was looking good that night, right? Another wink. I blushed harder than she had. She did take a perverse pleasure in my awkwardness. Luckily, Mr. Rappeau jumped in to save me.
So she knew right away he'd be coming to the farm. Well, that's our girl. She knows her stuff.
Well, that might be assuming too much of our love at first sight, I replied. Even I didn't think I had earned an invitation to the family home that first night.
Sam, Beth obviously connected with you. Your presence here is proof of that. But don't think she only had eyes for you that night.
That didn't register with me. I couldn't keep the confusion from my face as I looked from mother to father to daughter. Beth just smiled at me. I ducked my face and continued eating. I let the conversation pass over me for the next while. Beth caught up with her parents and the goings-on of the farm. How was the vegetable garden she started in high school? Did they still get in scraps with the neighbors over their wandering herd of goats? Well, tribe of goats, if you wanted to get technical, which Mr. Rappeau did. I jumped back in when the topic came around to the neighbors they liked, the Carsons. Do they still have those barn cats? Beth asked. That was always so weird to me. As a matter of fact, they have 2 more, Mrs. Rapeau said. You have to remember that not all farms are the farm. My curiosity got the better of me. Actually, I've never understood why you've never had a pet before. I feel like people on farms always have cats, dogs, or even adopted chickens running around the house. Is that just my dumb city kid assumptions? I mean, I've never lived out of the city, but I feel like I lived closer to animals with Nibbles, Boing Boing, Boots. Luckily, Beth didn't react like I had stepped over a line. It would just be weird for me to have a pet with everything we have going on at the farm. But you don't raise any animals for meat, right? You don't have to be sending Bessie to the slaughterhouse to have a different kind of connection with animals most people think of as pets.
Speaking of that connection, I know you really bonded with Boots.
Mr. Rapeau chimed in.
From how Beth tells it, he was almost your wingman. I'd imagine it was quite an adjustment after he went to the farm.
My parents had always used that euphemism on me, but it was jarring to hear it as I was having dinner at the farm. I stared at my empty plate for a second, then glanced up at the two doting parents across from me. Their remarkably genuine smiles coaxed the vulnerability out of me. I think you get it pretty well, actually. I could always rely on Boots to help me through a tense day. In my apartment or out at the park, most of my neighbors still don't know my name, but they always struck up a conversation with me anyways because Boots was so captivating. I don't even know if they recognize me anymore. I knew he was old and I knew he wasn't the same cat he used to be, but I just never really thought it would happen. I was surprised to not have to fight back tears as I got to this part. My parents just showed up at my place before I woke up. They were making me breakfast. It was just like when I was a kid. They were suddenly there, and Boots disappeared. Taken to the farm upstate, they said. I don't know. I guess it's just one of those lies you appreciate for being so obviously a lie, because it means they're trying to protect you. Beth stood up to clear the table while I stumbled through my story. The three of us at the table watched her walk through the door to the kitchen, her parents' eyes fixed on me with a sudden intensity as soon as the door swung closed behind her.
We love hearing about these special bonds,
Mr. Rapeau said. He leaned forward and actually straightened his shoulders to make me appreciate his height for the first time.
A bond between a person like you and an animal. It just doesn't exist between people. They become a part of you, your very personality, in a way that another human never can.
You know, you're right, I replied, surprised at how good it felt to be validated. I was always kind of ashamed for connecting with Boots more than any person. Well, before Beth, that is, I added with an awkward chuckle, and Mr. Rapeau nodded encouragingly.
Right. But even with our Beth, it's different, right? Maybe not better or worse, but Boots wasn't a relationship to you. He was you.
I didn't know what to say to that, because I couldn't say it better myself. Mr. Rapeau drank in the silence for a couple beats before hammering home his passion with a fist on the table.
That's why we bring pets to the farm. You can't just erase a connection like that. They need to be saved. They need to become a part of you for good, even after they stop living with you.
Mrs. Rapeau saw my eyebrows knit tighter and tighter as her husband spoke and laid a hand on his to slow him down. You'll have to forgive my husband. This is our life's work, and he gets excited, you know. But we don't want you to get the wrong idea. The farm isn't some macabre museum or anything. Think of it as a kind of halfway house between a pet's life with its family and your final union. They were speaking English, and I understood every word they said, but I didn't get it. I finally looked down at my lap in reaction to a distant pain, where I saw my hands digging into my khakis and scraping my thighs. I couldn't force my hands to open. Maybe I understood more than I could admit to myself. I raised my eyes back to the Rapeaus. A part of me hoped their wholesome smiles had mutated into a twisted grin. How could such pleasant people be in charge of something like... Mr. Rapeau jumped back in before I could finish my thought.
But you really are special, Sam. Normally we don't get to experience the union firsthand. Our warehouse is full of furry friends beloved by a family somewhere in Minnesota. We slip them into their CSA boxes, or sneak them into the cafeteria just at the right time, or find some other way to facilitate the union. But that can be years down the road.
That was too much for me. I think I was still breathing, but it was only in short, shallow gulps squeezed in as my entire body tensed. The union? Mrs. Rapeau leaned forward, concern clouding her strong face. That's what the farm is for, Sam. Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe we haven't been clear. You know how Carl Sagan always said that we are made of star stuff? That was his way of connecting us to the stars? Well, we connect people back to their beloved pets just like that. Don't you feel so much better after that casserole? It really was made especially for you, so Boots could become you. You become one. You know? When you consume... A tiny scream escaped my lips. Beth! Where was Beth? She wasn't a part of this. She couldn't be. She'd come in soon, scream with me, and we'd run out of this house together, sharing our horror. She'd never come back to the farm, with or without me. But all those things she said. No pets at the farm, it'd be too weird. She'd see him soon. Not me, they said, but Boots. Right on cue, Beth walked back in, oblivious to the horror playing out before me. You meeting Beth was such a blessing, Mrs. Rapeau said, gesturing to Beth as she retook her seat. For us, sure, it's so rejuvenating to get to see the fruits of our labor after so long working behind the scenes. But also for you, how many people get to say they actually followed their beloved pet to the farm? Beth's smile froze as she finally looked over to me. I wasn't even trying to hide my fear anymore. Sam, that's why I brought you here. Isn't that okay? I know remembering Boots is hard, but I knew it would help. Mom and Dad keep an eye on everyone after their unions, you know. They said you did so much better when you were a kid after your union with Nibbles and Boing Boing. She was in on this. This woman, the first woman I had ever known with certainty loved me back, took Boots to the farm. Not only that, but she made sure that I was at this table when they served him up. And they were all so righteous about it. 3 sets of eyes gazed at me with genuine concern as my body shut down in fright. Was I the crazy one? With that big of a warehouse, thousands of families must be doing business with the farm. Thousands of kids must be sitting down to dinner completely unaware that the family cat or dog or snake or mini pig is hidden in a casserole like a mom hides vegetables. Beth laid a hand on mine, coaxing it out of its rictus. He still gets emotional over this. I'm sorry. I'm sure he's grateful. He's just processing. Here, I think I know what will help. She took my arm and eased me out of my chair. I followed her dumbly into the living room, which I hadn't even seen in our rush up to the guest room. Sam, they did this for you to always remember him, and hopefully remember us. She pointed to the side wall, at a large framed portrait. It was out of place. I knew where it really belonged. Above my bed in the guest room to finish the series, along with my childhood guinea pig and rabbit. From inside the frame, Boots looked down at me. He stood proud, his fur glinting in the sun. I walked over and laid a trembling hand on his framed body. In a rush, the casserole spewed back out of my body, instantly covering the portrait. I guess my union with Boots wasn't all that permanent after all.
Author's note.
Hello, this is Nathan Ahlgrim, and if everything has gone according to plan, you have just finished listening to my story, The Farm. I did have an unfair advantage in this Broken Mirror story event because the prompt is actually mine. Sorry about that. But I did have an idea right away. Really coming down to just when you go to the in-laws, or at least the future in-laws, no matter how many times you do it, it's always a little tense. You're in someone else's family. And I don't know if I am the crazy one or if they're the crazy ones, if they're insane or I'm insane. And when I let that kind of go through my crazy filter, you get the farm. And really, one of my life goals is to just have one of those shoulder-perching cats. I want that in life. I also sincerely hope to not have to eat said cat, but yeah, who knows what the future brings. So I hope you enjoyed the story, and have a merry, merry, hopefully non-scary Christmas.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the story and the casserole. What did you think of our story this week, Rish Outfield? How was He Went to the Farm by our prompt deliverer? He was really prompt in his delivery, Nathan Ahlgrim.
This was the last one that I read. Over the summer, I think I had set a goal for myself, or for both of us, to read all of the entrants in the contest so that we could start, making decisions of what got accepted and what got rejected. And this was the very last one. And I had been surprised at the high quality of all the stories up to this point. I would send you a little review with like a grade, like a score from 1 to 10, not a C plus or anything like that. And this was the last one, and I think it was the darkest one. It has this premise with the pet, and it seems to have the least amount of like dread in it and weirdness. These seem like really decent folk, and then you get that ending. And I feel like it kind of comes out of nowhere. It hits you like a sucker punch because they are benevolent people, these two. Well, all three, there's not necessarily anything sinister going on in their minds. This is just a very nice thing that they do, and they're trying to do it for him, but it's a distasteful as hell thing.
I don't know. It was kind of tasty from what it sounded. It was just...
I guess you're right.
He said it was a great casserole, like nothing he'd ever had before. Although he had it before because he had one for Boing Boing and he had one for, what was the other one? Nibbles?
You remembered the names of the hamsters? Or was one a guinea pig and one a hamster?
I'm trying to remember. I think it was Nibbles and Boing Boing or something like that.
Well, you tell me what your reaction was to the ending. Is this something that you saw coming?
No, I did not see that coming at all. Yeah, it's funny because there's a lot of hints dropped there that you should be like, what is going on here? Like when he first pulls into the farm, there is a giant like warehouse behind the farmhouse with like freezers all along the side, he says, and we just assume that that's some kind of, I don't know, barn or slaughterhouse or something like that. We just, oh yeah, that's a normal farm thing, and we ignore it for some reason, and you go on. But what is a giant warehouse with freezers there for? I'm trying to think if there was other things that should have clued me in. I mean, I guess you're not really going to be clued in to it, like nobody's going to think, oh, they're probably serving him up his pet.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. That's you'd have to be an escape pod listener to say, oh, I knew how it was going to end.
So predictable.
But there are clues that something isn't right. They know so much about this guy and his history with pets, and there are pictures of his dead pets there.
Yeah, that's another clue, I guess. Another weird clue is that he's got the pictures of the pets over his bed and a spot waiting for another one.
I don't know. There are probably people that would take this worse than I did and would think that the ending just absolutely ruins the story. It's just it makes it just too gross or too uncomfortable or dark or whatever. But I think Nathan would tell you that that's what he was going for, is a shock ending, is something that you couldn't predict, and that the main character is not going to be able to get over. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you could put something like this behind you, but I don't think so. You have had that experience, and I'm going to bring it up in every single one of these episodes. You went and you met your future parents-in-law, and I haven't. And so I just have to imagine what that's like. And you want to put your best foot forward, but everybody is strange. Everybody is idiosyncratic. Nobody is perfect. Nathan mentions that in his author's note. Am I the crazy ones, or are they the crazy ones? Just everybody has quirks, but this seems like it's a deal breaker. It's a relationship ender. Even though it's a benevolent evil that they are doing. It's something, it's some kind of arcane ritual that bonds you with your animal on a higher level than just, there was an animal that stayed with me and I fed it until it died.
Right.
And so what they're doing is a really good thing, but it's uncomfortable. I guess it's like the mortician that made your loved one look their best and did a fine job.
Put the makeup on them and all that.
Yeah, I mean, that is a service that's really useful, really helpful, really nice, but we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to think about it. We don't want any details. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting. The thing that's the weirdest about it, I guess, it's just a societal thing, really. You know what I mean? Like, there are certain animals we do eat and certain animals we don't eat. But there's not like a really good reason behind it. You know what I mean? Like, why do you eat a cow or a chicken, but not a cat or a dog? They're all animals that are on the farm, and where did we decide, okay, when the dog dies, you don't eat it?
Hey, sewer rat may taste like pumpkin pie, but I'd never know because I wouldn't eat the filthy mother.
And there are cultures, I guess, out there that do, Talk about some Asian countries, I guess, that actually have dog. And, it's not a taboo or whatever. And yeah, it's just kind of an interesting thing to think about. You listen to the story and it's so horrible. Oh my gosh, they fed him his cat. That's just awful. But in reality, it's just a different kind of meat. Is it worse that they fed him his cat or they fed him a deer that he hunted or something, I don't know. It's just a kind of a weird thing that we just decided. The thing that I was thinking about that and where the things must have come from is just the animals that have uses outside of being meat. You know what I mean? Like the dog helps you with work. It, I don't know, helps you herd the sheep or something. So people don't eat the dog. The cat, keeps the vermin down around the farm or whatever. So we don't eat the cat. The horse carries you around and helps you do the stuff. So you don't eat the horse, but the cow or the sheep or whatever, they're just for that specific purpose of meat. So I guess that, those are the ones you eat. I don't know. It's an interesting kind of a concept, I guess, to think about.
I don't eat dog either.
I remember having an idea for a story at one point, and I have never written it, but I thought it might be interesting to have like an ambassador to an alien culture. And this alien culture, when someone dies, rather than bury their dead, they eat their dead. And, as they became more sophisticated and, originally it was just, you just eat the guy after he's dead. But, as time went by and they became more of a civilized society, it became more of a party or something like that. And they keep trying to get the ambassador to join in. He's like, oh no, I can't do that. Oh no, it's horrible. In my culture, it's considered a really bad thing to, eat someone from your species. And then in the end, he finally gives in and he does it. And apparently, like with their like you eat the other guy and then you like gain the knowledge or something, you you don't just get nutrients, but you get much more from it's like the way they pass their generational knowledge on or something like that is everybody has a bite of the guy who had the knowledge. I don't know. I thought that would be an interesting story. I never have written it though. So I suppose I just gave the idea to anybody who wants it.
Yeah, you just gave it to me. Then he comes back to Earth and he's like surrounded by all these people who are intellectuals and stuff who want to know, about this alien culture. And he looks at a couple of these people and he's like, I sure admire his mind.
Right.
I sure admire this guy's rapport with people. Everybody just likes him naturally. And his stomach rumbles as he's thinking these things. That's cool. I like that. You should write it. In fact, I challenge you to write it before this episode airs.
Oh, okay.
Because then you can say in the next episode, hey, I actually did write that story. So, I call dibs. Last episode, you talked about eating crickets.
Oh, that's right. That's weird that we got off on that tangent on that episode and not this one.
And just this year, in 2020, I tried frog legs for the first time.
Oh.
And my nephew really, really wanted frog legs. I don't know why, but they went to some place that had them. Maybe every grocery store has them. I don't know.
Really?
But he got like a dozen of them or whatever and brought them home and cooked them, and they smelled really good. But when it came time to eat them, I didn't want to do it. It was the knowledge of what they were. It was psychologically this was wrong to eat them.
Yeah, it's the societal thing.
And I wished that he had not told me what they were and just, here, have some chicken. Because when I forced myself to eat them, they were delicious. It tasted exactly like chicken.
Uh-huh.
It tasted like chicken with French fry sauce on it or something like that. Or not sauce, but seasoning,
Okay.
And I was just like, it's so good, but I wish you hadn't told me because it took me until they were cold to finally force myself to eat them, knowing that it was frog. And maybe that's my own stumbling block because I love frogs. I just love them. You know what I mean? In the same way as Nathan seems to really like cats. That was one of his goals, is to have a cat nailed to his shoulder, I think he'd said.
Is that a thing? Cats that stand on people's shoulders?
I don't know.
I don't know that I've ever seen such things.
We see it with parrots. We see it with falcons and stuff.
Right. Sorry, I'm interrupting your story. Go back to what you were saying.
Who knows? I mean, maybe Nathan is a really, really muscular guy and he can fit an entire cat on his shoulder.
Just on his massive shoulder.
But yeah, it was good, and you would have agreed that it was good, the frog.
I'd actually like to try it, to tell you the truth.
But there was a mental hurdle to get over because of my feelings toward frogs. And I don't know if I would have the same problem with an animal that I didn't like. I don't know. There are certain things, it's like you're eating dog. Oh, geez.
Yeah.
It's...
Dog is something I wouldn't really like to try, but, especially after your story about frog legs, I'm like, oh, I'd like to give that a shot. But dog, no, I don't want to give that a shot.
Well, you never hear people say that dog tastes just like chicken. Never. But almost every other animal tastes just like chicken.
Yeah, I've had some weird foods before. Like, I've had a gator sausage.
Yeah.
And I've had rattlesnake.
Wow.
Cricket, of course.
Yeah.
there are certain things, and I thought about that not too long ago. I was just like, you know what? There's a lot of animals that people do. They eat them. It's not even a weird thing to eat them, but I've never had them. You know what I mean? Like goose, for example. People talk about having their Christmas goose and all that stuff. I've never had a goose before. Duck is, Peking duck and all that kind of stuff. That's something that's been around and it's been a thing for a long time. And was it a duck on the Christmas Story movie at the end where she's like, oh, it's got its head still?
Yeah, they go to the Chinese restaurant.
Right.
They cut its head off with a meat cleaver. You've never had duck.
I've never had duck. I've never had goose.
How about deer or buffalo? Have you had either of those?
I have had buffalo, but I haven't had deer. Generally, deer is one of those things you have to hunt yourself.
Yeah.
Or know somebody who's a hunter to eat. And I guess I've just not known. I mean, I've known people that were hunters, but apparently they weren't sharing hunters. But I would like to try that too, just the things that folks have people just eat. And I like the experience to be able to say, oh yeah, I tried that. One time when I was in South America, there was a guy who
passed away and there was a buffet.
Yes, and wow, the knowledge I gained. No, he had a thing of milk that had gone, it had spoiled. It wasn't just spoiled, it was chunky spoiled.
Uh-huh.
Like, it didn't just smell weird. It had chunks in it. And the guy's like, oh, this is, you still good. You just do this. And he pours it into a cup and he put a bunch of sugar into it and stirred it up. And he's like, yeah, it's still, you should try it. And I'm like, all right. And so I tried it. And it wasn't very good, to tell you the truth. But it wasn't the worst thing ever. It was kind of like half yogurt or something. I mean, I don't know. It was somewhere in between. I don't know how yogurt is made. That's one of the mysteries of the universe. You'd probably have to eat an alien to gain the knowledge of how yogurt is made, really, because it's some kind of magic. But I assume it must be something similar to that. You let it curdle and spoil. I don't know. But yeah, it was just a very odd thing. And, I heard of another guy told me a story that he ate like guinea pig or something like that.
Interesting.
When he was in like Honduras or somewhere like that. And I was just like, guinea pig, really? You mean like the same as nibbles? But I guess you eat the animals that are, the ones around you, the ones that are native to your area or something. I assume that probably people ate capybara in those places in South America, but oh my gosh, I don't know that I could do that. I look at it looked like a giant rat. And rat is one thing that, it doesn't matter how exotic it is, that I will not. More so than dog. I would eat 2 dogs before I ate a rat.
But sewer rat may taste like pumpkin pie.
Really? Okay, I take it all back then. I will eat sewer rat here and now. Do you have any?
You're more likely, I would think, to have rats, right?
That's probably true.
Do you guys not have rats in Houston?
I'm sure they're here. I haven't seen any, but I've seen a great deal of friggin' cockroaches, so I'm sure rats are not far behind. They usually, run together. They are birds of a feather.
Do you remember that episode of Friends where it was the first season where they were talking about, I'm trying to remember, let's say it's Chandler says, well, it's like that when your dog dies and your family tells you that it went, to a farm upstate. And Ross goes, oh, that's funny because our dog actually did go to a farm upstate. And Monica goes, oh, Ross. And when we were talking about this episode, I just thought of that from Friends. And he had lived all these years thinking that it actually had gone to a farm. Was that ever something that you were told as a child?
No, sadly, my parents weren't kind and gentle enough to let me down easy. They just told me my dog went to the pound because it had bit someone. And worse yet, they told me, and they said that because it bites, they probably won't be able to adopt it out. So in other words, its life is over. I did have a friend who had a dog. I don't know how he got it, but it was like a purebred of some breed. I can't remember what it was. We'll just say it was a Cocker Spaniel. I don't know. It was a purebred, though, and he got it and had this plan. It was a male dog, and his plan was for it to be a stud. He was going to send it out to, to people who were breeding these dogs, and he planned on, getting fees for pimping out his dog. Unfortunately, he didn't have a fence or anything like that at his house. And so that, they couldn't just let the dog out. And so when they would put it out, they would have to tie it to something with a rope. And after a few months of doing this, they just felt bad about doing this to this poor dog. So my friend tells me that they found somebody who had a farm that they could give their dog to. And, it was going to be so much better because it was a big farm and it could run wherever it wanted. And, it wouldn't be tied up like it was at their house. I don't know, to tell you the truth, that whether that was true or not. But after listening to this story, it makes me wonder if my friend had himself a special casserole that Christmas. You know what I think the most disturbing part about this story is?
No, what?
It's how somehow his parents are in on this. Not just his girlfriend's parents. His own parents were in on this because he's already had Boing Boing and Nibbles go to the farm. And now Boots, when Boots was getting ragged or whatever, one day his parents were there. He woke up and they were there, and they said that they took Boots to the farm upstate. Then, more so even he the dad or whatever is talking, oh yes, usually we don't get to see the actual communion or whatever they called it. Normally we just have to slip it into their CSA box or put it at the cafeteria or whatever. But this is a thing that goes on, like all over the place. Apparently all these parents, without telling their children, are feeding them their pets. That, I think, is the most disturbing part about the whole thing. That there's just, I don't know how many, but, they had a giant warehouse full of freezers, which I assume are full of all the dead pets that they're feeding to people eventually.
They slip it into their school lunch.
Yeah, it's a huge conspiracy of feeding pets to children for some reason, and they don't tell them about it. How is it a society-wide thing like this, yet the children don't know? Because eventually, this guy's an adult. He's going home to meet his girlfriend, and yet he still doesn't know. His parents still haven't told him about it. Maybe they were going to tell him once he finally gets married and said, okay, when your kids get pets, well, let me tell you, you're going to have to do the tooth fairy thing because it's not real. And also, when their pets die, the farm upstate is also not, it kind of is real, but it's different than what you think. But yeah, I don't know. There's just something about that. This vast conspiracy of pet feeders in Minnesota. It's a scary place. I'm never going to Minnesota now.
You were never going to begin with.
I'm a big fan of the Minnesota Vikings too, but I can no longer ever go and see a game in their stadium because I'd be too creeped out looking at all the people around me going, did this guy feed his pet to his kid? Or was it that guy?
The guy next to you says, here, I got an extra chili dog. He goes, go ahead, Mr. Anklovich. Chow down. You're like, what? I'm sorry, what'd you call me?
Can't do it. All right, everybody. I think we have reached the end of our episode here, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. And just like to say thanks for coming back for another serving of the Dunesteef audio fiction casserole. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. And we'll be back again, surprise, surprise, with another version of this same prompt. We'll see how coming home to meet the folks can take a wrong turn in another way next time.
We hope that your holiday season is magical and quite delicious, and we will meet you again right here soon.
All right.
I've been Rish Outfield.
And I have been Big Anklevich. See you next time.
The Dunesteef is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license, meaning share it with everyone, but don't sell it or change it. From the Dunesteef Audio Fiction Magazine team, back on topic, guys. Take two.
Hello! Oh, I should probably not be touching the mic when I do that.
Or yourself.
Hello! I swayed back and forth, putting my hand on the Subaru, then removing it, then putting it back on. This was exactly when boots would have saved me. Why didn't I wear any boots? With that. Why would it save you? Is it muddy? Beth had promised me a Norman Rockwell Christmas. There isn't anything my parents don't do for Christmas dinner, she had said 2 weeks earlier. Yule log, eggnog, Christmas crackers, fruitcake, you name it. They'll even serve you up your dead pet. I'm sure She had been hyping it up all week, certain that an all-out holiday celebration would be just the thing to bring me out of my post-boots funk. Boy, this guy really liked these boots. What happened to these boots? Did the soles rip off? The bubbling casserole took center stage, but it was surrounded by a glittering crystal bowl of chunky cranberry sauce, thick slabs of ham, and a platter piled high with pillowy dinner rolls. Let me suggest you eat the ham and not the casserole, buddy. And I hope you have an appetite to match your manners. The first meal at the farm is always a memorable one, because it's your dead pet. I was just walking around Lake Harriet with boots. I did that a lot back then. I like boots. Better than sneakers. They're nice. But I couldn't help myself. I had to get closer. And it was a good thing, too, because I immediately knew I'd be seeing him again soon, and eating his cat in a casserole. Boots is a monkey, not a cat. You crazy people.
Hey, how'd it go?
Not so good. He walked me to the subway and said, we should do this again.
Oh.
What? You said we should do it again. That's good, right?
No. Loosely translated, we should do this again means you will never see me naked.
Since when?
Since always. It cushions the blow. Yeah, it's like when you're a kid and your parents put your dog to sleep and they tell you it went off to live on some farm.
That's funny. Because our parents actually did send our dog off to live on a farm.
Ross?
What? Hello? The Milners farm in Connecticut? The Milners, they had this unbelievable farm. They had horses and then rabbits that he could chase, and it oh my God, Cheep Cheep!
That's it.
I pressed the button.
You're listening to the Dunesteef Audio Fiction Magazine.